as we always do on our DFS episodes, we start with the golf course. And Marco Simone is a golf course they played at the Italian Open at. It was designed in 1991 by Jim Fazio and his nephew, I believe, Tom Fazio II, did the renewal in 2018. And we had the Italian Open hosted there on the DP World Tour in 2021 and also this year. So the winners of those have been Nikolai Højgaard and Robert McIntyre. Is that right? McIntyre won this one.
That is correct. He got the
Yes.
better of Matt Fitzpatrick, I believe.
So number of the Europeans have played Marco Simone in competition. None of the Americans have, which is an interesting thing. It reminds me a little bit of Le Golf National, where only Justin Thomas had competed. But when you look at this golf course, what stands out to you, Patrick?
You know, the term we heard all U.S. Open week was half pars. And I think once you get past those first 6 holes, the first third of the golf course, it's going to be an extremely back and forth type of competition. We heard Victor Hovland talk about it today, where he really doesn't like this golf course for a stroke play event. And I think Sepp Straka even echoed his comments, where for a stroke play event, you know, probably not their cup of tea, but for a match play and the volatility and the scoring that it allows, and how on some holes par is going to be a really good score. On other holes, you're going to have to go and get a birdie, potentially an eagle. And you look from 7 on, I mean, 220-yard par 3, 500-yard par 4, just really tough holes right there. But then you get a par 5, a drivable par 4. There's a few of those as well. You get one on 11. You get another coming in on 16. I believe there's one in the first stretch of holes as well, where
5.
A couple of them have water around the green as well. And so I think it's going to set up for a really fun and exciting Ryder Cup. And you kind of see it with the holes and the composition with the lengths. And, a number of the par 3s are on the odd holes, where you kind of know which type of player is going to play on which hole. Patrick Cantlay said today, Fred Couples came up to him and was like, "You're on the odd holes." And he was like, "All right." Didn't really know. Someone asked him, was like, "Is there a reason?" He goes, "I'm just told I'm going to do what I'm told to do." And so I'm really looking forward to it. I came into the week without much knowledge of the golf course, but as we build towards it, I'm really getting excited.
It does look like a pretty cool golf course for an event like this. You mentioned half par, and really par is an arbitrary number. In the game of golf, the only reason we have par at all, in my opinion, other than telling golfers what they should be expected to do, it at the professional level and in any competition level, it's really just to measure where people are when they're at different phases of the golf course. So you understand when somebody's on Sunday on the first hole and somebody's on the 7th hole, where they stand. It gives you a kind of a number to relate to. In match play, it's entirely useless. I mean, it really serves no purpose whatsoever. So you could take a 360-yard hole and move the tee forward and make it drivable. It could be not drivable. There's a par attached to it, but it just doesn't matter. A 500-yard hole, I mean, technically this is a par 71 as they're playing this week. If you go and play the golf course, it's a par 72. And one of the holes, I believe, what is it, number 7? That's the converted par 5 into a par 4. I mean, it's the same thing, whether it's a par 4 or a par 5. It makes no difference because you're going shot for shot when it comes to match play. So I think that's going to be an interesting thing. It gives you a little bit of a different viewing experience. But as you look at this golf course from a DFS standpoint, Patrick, what kind of things stand out to you? Do you think this is more of a second shot golf course, more of a driver's golf course? Is there a certain area of the game that you think will be of extra importance?
Oh, gosh. I think that's really tough to say. I think it's going to be a tremendous test. Not quite a major test, but maybe major adjacent, a really good signature event, perhaps. But I really think ball strikers are going to reign supreme around this place. And you think about someone like, Højgaard, who played well here. He's a guy who can hit it long and is a really good iron player as well. And I kind of take that type of profile And if you have someone with a complete game like a Cantlay or a Xander or Rory and Victor, they're obviously going to thrive around just about any golf course. But I really think if you're in between skill sets and, maybe I want to go for a guy who can get a hot putter, which is always useful in match play, I kind of lean more towards the ball strikers because I know these greens are pretty tiered, pretty difficult. I believe they had one of the higher 3-putt percentages on the DP World Tour, which I think you could look at one of two ways, where you would think the good putters would be able to separate themselves more. But at the flip, it could be a good thing for a Scotty Scheffler, where if everyone's missing a lot of putts, that'll bring them back up to kind of level par in that respect. So I'm kind of leaning more towards the ball strikers. And, if they have the full skill set, like most of the 24 guys do, that's just gravy on top.
Yeah, the full skill set's going to be very important. Now, I do look at this golf course as more of a driver's golf course. I think it's a first shot golf course first because there's so much trouble. And you look at the general theme here, and you're talking about fairways that have some, they're hittable fairways. They're not overly narrow. I've heard they're a little wider than they were at Le Golf National, but just off of them is some pretty heavy rough. You get into the native grasses there, and it can be extremely penal. You have some water that can be extremely penal. I do believe getting the ball in play off the tee will be paramount, very, very important. But at the same time, in a format like this, making birdies is the thing that typically wins you holes. And so now iron play becomes critical. Putting does carry some importance, but really that comes from the iron play. So I'm with you in the ball striker category. I may put a little bit of a lean to guys who are really, really strong drivers of the golf ball. But all in all, I think this is going to be quite a test. I really do. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to seeing how it's played in a competition like this, seeing how Luke Donald sets it up. That's the other big difference in a Ryder Cup and a DP World Tour event or a PGA Tour event or a major is the captain can set up the golf course to try to benefit his team. So before we get to a break, this is a unique Ryder Cup as well, because typically the Americans have the clear distance advantage and a clear driving accuracy disadvantage. But this one seems like it might be a little bit different. You may even lean the other way, where the Europeans have the advantage when it comes to distance and the Americans have the advantage when it comes to accuracy. What are your thoughts on that?
I think we touched on it a little bit last week, where the Europeans and the American skill sets are really converging, because I believe you mentioned it, how all the European guys, their edge really comes from growing up on these type of golf courses and playing these type of golf courses from when they first touch a club until, they go to college, like a John Rahm in the United States or a Ludwig at Texas Tech. And then that's what they really lean on. But their skill sets, they're all pretty freaking similar. And when you look at driving distance, you obviously have Rory at the top, John Rahm, Ludwig, and then I think intertwined somewhere is like a Wyndham Clark for the top 4 in terms of driving distance in this field. So they do have the distance edge, and I believe technically the Americans have like a point something % edge in driving accuracy. Like, you're really splitting hairs when it comes to off the tee and who's better at what in terms of distance and accuracy between these two teams. So I think I'm not really sure how Luke Donald can set it up for his team. I know Rory McIlroy mentioned getting wedges out of the hands of some of the Americans and turning this into a mid-iron, long iron type of affair. But I think that also could lean into the Americans when you have guys like, if a vintage Justin Thomas shows up. I mean, that guy ate long irons for breakfast for most of his career. Colin Morikawa as well. Brooks Koepka too.
Scotty
Scheffler, of course. How could I forget about the world number one? And so I think, yes, there was a little game within the game already. You saw it where the U.S., their scouting trip, the rough was a little different than it already is this week. They already trimmed it down in some parts where they weren't expecting. But outside a couple nuances, I think, and maybe tightening the fairway and creating a few bottlenecks so players try to avoid, pounding it down there perhaps. I mean, the skill sets are so similar that I think it's a little tough to create a significant or, noticeable edge for the home team.